Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm just sharing a couple of slides with you. My name's Terry. I am the event manager for Renaissance Geo and Nearpod. Lovely to meet you this afternoon. We will be starting shortly, but just wanted to share some of the details of today's session and what elements we'll be using. You will be muted on arrival, so just bear that in mind. And the event will be recorded. We will be using some Q&A and chat functions today, so you can use the buttons on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A bot so we can manage them effectively. And if you are also wanting to use chat, do tell us where you're joining us from today and say hello in the chat box for us, please. We will be using Nearpod today and some interactivity, so I'd encourage you to click the join.nearpod.com website, and you can use that on any device, your phone, tablet, or your computer. And you can use this code here to interact with the collab boards. So please do that if you can. As I welcome you all, please do say hello in the chat box for us today. Tell us where you're joining us from. As I mentioned, you will be muted and this event will be recorded and be sent in due course. We will be using the Q&A and the chat function, so do use the Q&A for any questions so we can manage them effectively. And do tell us in the chat where you're joining us from. Do make sure that it's directed to everyone, so all messages should go to everyone so everyone can see those messages. As I mentioned, we will be using Nearpod today, so do use the Nearpod link there, join.nearpod.com, and use code F9K4W so you can interact in today's session. Okay, without further ado, it has hit 4 o'clock today, so I am going to hand you over to my colleague, Sarah, who's going to do an introduction, who will then be introducing Fiona and Tracy. So over to you guys.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Terry. I apologise if we get some background noise because I've got my youngest home from school now. So, but I'm sure we'll manage just fine. So, first of all, yes, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's great to have you all here for this final part of our series. My name's Sarah. I'm the UK Sales Manager at Nearpod, and it's just been an absolute privilege to support this series and to see so many of you come together over the past few months to explore what contemporary adaptive teaching looks like in real classrooms today. Throughout the series, we've been guided by, of course, the brilliant Dr. Fiona Aubrey-Smith, who many of you know from her extensive work in education research and school improvement. And we're delighted to also be joined today by Tracy Murray, who is Deputy Head Teacher at Grange Park Primary School and who will be contributing to today's discussion. And Tracy's been instrumental in leading inclusive practices and adaptive teaching approaches across her school. So together, Fiona and Tracy will help us reflect on the journey we've taken through this series, bringing together themes of inclusion, data-informed teaching and learner engagement, and focusing today on how equity as a mindset can shape every aspect of teaching and learning. So thank you again for all being here, whether you've joined us for every session or this is your first one. We're so glad to have you as a part of this community. So please do say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand over to Fiona to lead us on our final conversation in the series. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your warm welcome, and to the Nearpod and Renaissance for your generous support of this project as we explore what we really mean by contemporary adaptive teaching. Now, I'm just going to lean on Sarah for a moment just to pop some slides on the screen for us that are just going to take us through some core ideas as part of this session. So, just to reiterate that warm welcome to everybody that's joining us today, both those live joining the session, and I know a lot of people watch the recording of these sessions back, so a very warm welcome to you all. Now, we just want to start by just kind of reflecting on why now? What's this all about? And if you haven't already downloaded the Contemporary Adapting Teaching paper, I'd really encourage you to do so now. We'll pop a QR code on the screen if you haven't already got that paper download, and we'll also pop a link into the chat box so you can download the full paper. Now, if we pop onto our timeline on screen, I'm going to lean on the wonderful Sarah to take us through to this. We just want to share a little bit with you about kind of where this work's come from and where it's going to. So back in February, golly, it seems like such a long time ago now, we launched this paper, the Contemporary Adaptive Teaching Discussion Paper, so that we can start to kind of provoke and stimulate some thinking about how contemporary adaptive teaching is different or is moved on or developed from the broader concept that we think of as adaptive teaching. We had a launch roundtable to start discussing and exploring some of the ideas, and some of the colleagues on this call live with us now were at that session with us, and we've since had a series of virtual roundtables to try and unpick and unpack some of the ideas. It's been really fascinating to see how many conversations have also taken place around our virtual roundtables, where we know the discussion paper has been used as the stimulus for staff training, staff meetings, insets, twilights, and so on. So we've had lots and lots of perspectives from different school contexts, different roles, different places, catchments, age phases, etc., come back into this piece of work and really help morph it into something that is a shared definition of contemporary adaptive teaching. This is the last of our virtual roundtables, and then after this session, we start kind of drawing all of that work together to create a final version of the paper in November that we published not that long before Christmas. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're nearly there. Now, I'm just going to skip back on the Nearpod lesson for a moment, because if you haven't already seen in the paper, there are 5 themes set out we really want to be thinking about when we think about this contemporary element of contemporary adaptive teaching. And those 5 themes, as you can see on screen now, are notions around, what is data-informed teaching? We know the insights are at the heart of adaptive teaching, gathering insights from the young people in the room, the dynamics in the room, the work they produce, their assessments, reading the room, all those millions and millions of data points that teachers gather in every single moment of learning. So, what do we do with those? How do we process those? How do we make meaning of that? And what's the role of digital in that space? The second theme explores inclusion through design. How do we give young people the dignity they deserve in the moment within their learning? How do we make sure that every voice, every characteristic, every identity is both represented in learning content itself, but represented in the offer that we give them about how to process, capture, and represent the learning that they've worked through? In theme 3, we lean into this notion of deliberate autonomy. There's lots of conversation about agency and autonomy in classrooms, but what do those ideas really mean? And what are the role of digital in enabling that proactively, deliberately, not just incidentally? Theme 4 picked up on this notion of intervention questioning. So what are the questions we ask? Why do we ask them? What do we expect to do with the answers to those questions? And ultimately, whose benefit are the answers to questions really for? How can we utilize those things, that thinking, to help us get really sharp and really focused with the questioning that we use, both from educators and learners? And then today's theme, really digging into equity, not just as a series of actions or provision, but equity as a mindset. What does that really mean? What does that really look like? And that's why I'm so excited to have a brilliant school leader here with us today, Tracy Murray, who is so passionate about this notion of equity as a mindset. So in a minute, I'm going to introduce you over to Tracy, but first I just want to ask you these things. When we think about those 5 themes, what's the difference between traditional approaches to adaptive teaching and contemporary lens on adaptive teaching? Because since the original research that has underpinned adaptive teaching was published, all kinds of things have happened, haven't they? We've seen all kinds of geopolitical shifts, different things happening globally in terms of media, in terms of law, in terms of geopolitical events. We've seen changes to economies, to social dynamics, to cultural influence all over the world, specifically affecting our learners both directly and indirectly. We've seen a change, maybe post-COVID, maybe in parallel to that, of the kind of social and emotional landscape that learners are living within. Generation Alpha, Generation Z, the young people in our schools today, see themselves with different identities than those who are an older generation educating them, whether that's an early entrant teacher or an established school leader. We know that there are some increasing challenges around the level of need coming into our classrooms, whether that's formalised special educational needs and disabilities, or whether they're undiagnosed or unnoticed needs. We know that there is an increased level of need, and that creates all kinds of different barriers to learning, those that we know how to overcome and those that we're still learning how to overcome most effectively and impactfully. We know beyond school, it's a very complex space with on-demand technologies, personalised profiles and norms. It's a normalised way of experiencing in the shops, on television, on personal devices. Like, there's a way of thinking now that's very much about on-demand, relevant to me. So how does that affect the thinking in our classroom when we're consuming, when we're using, when we're connecting? And then what's the role of digital, of automation, of artificial intelligence in all of this space? And what are the implications on the young people we work with, and ultimately the young people we're all here to serve, but also for our teachers, our support staff, the wider community of people that sit around our learners, ready to support them. All kinds of implications there around teacher training, recruitment, retention, development, professional learning, and so on. So lots and lots and lots of things for us to think about. Now, what I'd like to do in just a moment is pass over to our guest speaker for today, Tracy Murray, who's going to talk us through some ideas and some classroom school realities around this notion of equity as a mindset. And as you listen to Tracy, I'd like you to be thinking about these comparatives between a traditional way of thinking about adaptive teaching and what a contemporary lens on this space might look like. For example, through a traditional lens, whose life experiences and characteristics do our teaching resources and stimulus and spaces that we create for learning really speak to? And how much do we really, really know about the life experiences that our learners bring into their classroom? It's not just about prior knowledge that's subject or domain specific, but prior knowledge from the whole manifestation of their life experience so far. What's the lens that they see each lesson through? So those traditional ideas, what does that mean? What does that look like? And through a contemporary lens, how can we utilize some of the brilliant digital tools we have available to us to create capacity through productivity, efficiency, accessibility, engagement? How do we create capacity to listen, to really listen to our learners and young people, to learn from them about how best to support and help them? And what might enable teachers to really utilize that, to increase their teaching capacity, to represent and include the very many ranges of diverse identities that we have? So before we hand over to Tracy, I think we have a quick collab board, don't we, Sarah? Let's just lean into that. So if you would like to join into the Nearpod, there's a link in the chat now. We'll refresh it to make sure everyone's got access to that. And I'd like you just to share a thought. Pick maybe the traditional ways of thinking about adaptive teaching, or a contemporary way of thinking about adaptive teaching. But what speaks to you? What's on your mind right now as we've just talked through some of these things? If you have a look on the screen now, you'll see the collab board available. If you click on the Nearpod link, add the code F9K4W, and you'll be able to land in this lesson and join the collab board with us. So, whose life experiences do our stimuli speak to? How can our contemporary digital tools broaden that? How can these digital tools help us to really understand and explore learner life experience and their holistic prior knowledge? Let's take a few minutes. Let's add some ideas onto this board, and then we're going to start digging into those further with Tracy's capable expertise. And if there's anybody who's having any new to using a Nearpod lesson or having any difficulty accessing any links, do let us know in the chat and we can give you a hand with that. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's a panel to share your thoughts, and then you can click on the little drop down next to that, whether you want it to go under the traditional heading or under the contemporary heading. The questions, as a reminder, are in the panel just above the blue section of the screen. We'll just give that a couple of moments. So while we get those ideas down in the background, keep that Nearpod tab, the Nearpod lesson open so you can contribute to those as we go. But I'm now going to take us over to our special guest speaker, Tracy. Now, I'm super excited that Tracy's with us today because Tracy is one of the lead deputy head teachers at Grange Park Primary School, which is part of the brilliant Connect Education Trust. And across Connect Education Trust, there's been some phenomenal work in this space, both about traditional forms of adaptive teaching, but then lifting and elevating that into this contemporary adaptive teaching space. Tracy, a very, very warm welcome to you. I'm going to pass over to you now just to take us on a bit of a journey through what you've been doing at Grange Park Primary and how we might think about this idea of contemporary adaptive teaching specific to equity as a mindset. Tracy.
Thank you, Fiona. That was quite an introduction. I'm feeling very proud, as I put on my very first slide, as the deputy head teacher at Grange Park Primary School. I'm always proud of the work that my staff are doing, especially the teachers in the classroom. We introduced Nearpod into our school around 2020, and we've been refining our practice using Nearpod ever since. So we've had a lot of time really to dig deeper into what Nearpod has to offer. So next slide, please. Or can I? So Fiona asked me to really think about equity as a mindset in the context of contemporary adaptive teaching. And that for me is a really, really big phrase. So I started off thinking that I wanted to really personalize this and think about what that means for us at Grange Park. So it was very difficult for me to summarize, but I have summarized into three sorts of areas. And the first is that equity isn't about treating everybody the same. It's certainly about giving each learner, each child, each pupil what they need to thrive. I know a very long time ago we had a cartoon with a fish and a dog and a monkey, and we were judging them all on climbing the tree. And, that's always sat with me. And I use that still today in some of the insets that I deliver. We need to be sure that we are not treating everybody the same, but giving each child what they need to thrive. And so we really intentionally recognize and respond to the diversity of the children in our classes. Then we also think about equity, not just that we adapt, but within the lens of equity, how we should be adapting for the children. We adjust all of the time. I know when I started teaching, we used to plan whole units at a time. So your half term of English was planned from beginning to end. We don't do that, because for us that doesn't mean that. That means that we aren't able to adapt as we go along. And for us, as I said, equity means that our children are guiding how we plan and how we adapt sessions to meet everybody's needs. And then very lastly, we build belonging and we build voice into the classroom culture. We believe that adaptive teaching becomes collaborative. We really ensure that our children in the classroom shape the learning pathways and the success criteria that we that we deliver on a day-to-day basis. The shift of, and for want of a better word, of power from the teacher as teacher at the front of the classroom that knows everything, that they just want to impart that knowledge, has really shifted. And we really believe that our teachers are facilitators, and they facilitate and adapt according to the children's needs. Next slide. So I could definitely go on for days and days and days, but in this discussion, I just want to share one year group, one subject, and one lesson. And the reason that I want to do that is because this is 45 minutes of time within a week of learning, or a whole year of learning. And the adaptations and the equity that you'll see in this one year group, one subject, one lesson is so big that I'm sure you can imagine the power of that. If this is just one lesson, then you can imagine what we can do with a whole week's worth of lessons. So this is a Neopod of a religious and worldview education, which is what we teach as a non-denominational school. We obviously have equality and tolerance at the heart of our character traits, and so we teach religious and worldview education. And you can see in the top right-hand corner, we use walkthroughs and flashbacks, part of our pedagogy of retrieval practice. And so that's on the first slide. So you can see towards the bottom that on the very first slide, as a flashback, the teacher has planned in an open-ended question. And they've got at the bottom an opportunity for all children to record audio if they don't want to type their response in. So already, this first slide doesn't hinder the outcome for the children. All of our children have different starting points. So some may want to record what they've learned and what they remember. Some may not be able to record that as, typing into the box. Some may have to actually just talk about it. And so already we've got the smallest snapshot of equity amongst two sets of children with different starting points. The concept and the outcome is that the teacher wants to know whether the knowledge has been retained from the previous lesson. And so just in this one slide, we've removed barriers for many children in the classroom. Next slide, please. So what follows is a set of embedded activities. You can see the first one that I showed on the first slide is an open-ended question. But very quickly, within the first 10 minutes of the session, the teacher is asking the children to retrieve information using quiz, using the collaborate board, using fill in the blanks, and using matching pairs. So again, we've got a whole series of, well, I'd call it multimedia questions, really, so that the teacher can have instant feedback gathered in lots of different ways, so that there isn't any barriers. There's lots of different opportunities for all children in the class, no matter what their preferred learning style is, to respond to questions. Next slide. So what follows after that is a number of scenarios, and they get progressively more complex that the children can work through with partners or within groups. It does, therefore, because I know a lot of people worry about this, the scenarios are there digitally, but there is still a collaboration and an oracy element, because these scenarios ask children to work together, as I said, maybe in partners or in groups. And the slide deck, well, Neopod allows the slides to be prepared using lots of multimedia options. So there are pictures, there are little videos that the children can watch, but This particular slide deck doesn't have it because it is for year 5, but our younger children like to have lots of different images embedded into the slides. But what I wanted to really point out is that at the top you can see that the teacher is letting the children know that these scenarios that are getting progressively more difficult and progressively more sort of philosophical, the teacher will then put it into student-paced mode. So those children that want to think deeper about a particular scenario, or those children who want to move more quickly through them, or want to start at slide 2 or slide 4 because they have a particular interest in any of these scenarios, can do that. They're working at their own pace. They're working through as many or few scenarios as they would like to work through because they're working at their own pace. It also gives the teacher then an opportunity to walk around, to support, to push children a little bit further on, or support them with something a little bit earlier on in the slide deck. And we've used student pace mode in all areas of learning, and it really, really supports children with different starting points. Next slide, please. Each of the slides, as you would have noticed on the previous slide, has a digging deeper at the bottom. So again, that gives a lot of opportunity for the children to dig a little bit deeper if they want to, but they don't necessarily need to. And then at the very end of the slide deck, there is an opportunity for the children to draw. And in our school, we have one-to-one Chromebooks. We're very lucky, and we have styluses. And so again, this is another opportunity for expression. We've had children drawing, we've had children talking, we've had children collaborating, we've had children answering questions, recording their responses to questions, and now we have an opportunity for them to express themselves in drawing. So I do think that, sorry, one last slide, please, the next slide. I do think that one subject, one lesson in one year group has learners learning through choice. It has adaptation according to different starting points. It has purposeful data collection at the very start when the children are responding to questions. That feeds into feature planning. It has self-paced learning design, and it has a multimedia slide deck. And I mean, what more could you ask for in terms of equity and children with different starting points? That's it. Thank you very much.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Tracy. It was really interesting to hear you then sort of share those insights about the notion of equity being both in terms of accessing the learning opportunities in the first place and how the teachers are able to offer a greater sense of a feeling of belonging and equity of access, and also in the work that the students then do and the way in which they do those things in terms of output, but also the pace and the individual or socialized way that they might work with that. And I think that's something I'd really like to just lean into with the broader group of colleagues that are with us on the session now. I'm going to ask you in a moment, and I know there's colleagues from all kinds of different school contexts and sectors and age groups now. So I just want to ask you, colleagues, what does this look like for your learners? We're going to pop a question on the screen now. And it's this one. So just think about one learner that you work with for a moment. It might be in a class that you teach. It might be an adult that you have a training role with. It might be a child at home, perhaps. Just think for a moment just on one specific real person. And it's really helpful to do that because it keeps us anchoring our thinking around real complex human beings, because every single learner has this beautiful complexity to them. So what would an equitable approach in the classroom mean for that specific learner? And depending on how you feel comfortable sharing, if you could either pop your thoughts in the chat box, please, or use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen if you would like to contribute orally, or if you'd like to contribute with an anonymous post on our collab board, we'd love for you to join the Nearpod link. The link's in the chat panel if you didn't grab that earlier on. if you could post on the Clapboard. So 3 different ways to do this: the chat box, hand up feature for the microphone on the Clapboard. But as this is that virtual roundtable discussion towards shaping this paper, I'd be really grateful for contributions from all of the colleagues on the call. I wonder who can be my hero and start us off on this. What does this mean? What does equity look like for the learner that you have in mind? And how we're nearing towards half term. We've got a very quiet group. It's going to make for a very short virtual roundtable, I think, if we have that. I wonder if I can encourage someone perhaps to hop onto the microphone and share with us, just thinking about one of the learners that you work with, what would enable them to feel a sense of equity? Helen, I'm going to come over to you. We'll just enable your microphone, Helen Cotton, and then come over to you. And you are my hero, Helen, for starting us off. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed.
Okay, so it was a lad that I'm thinking about who's got just a lot of attachment difficulties. And it was very much, this was a past student, very much accessing the same stuff as what his peers were accessing. So it wasn't always just learning, it was, he also had dyspraxia. So it was just moving around the place as well and being able to just do the same as his friends, really. That was basically it.
And what sort of things for that learner, Helen, what sort of things can be put in place, either already in place or can be put in place that help with that in your view?
So we were, I suppose it's like Nearpod, we were using technology to make sure that that it was a tool that he could access to make sure that his needs were met. So adapted tools, I suppose, rather than changing the objective that they were looking at. Or it was, down the tools and just go outside, and we all went outside and accessed outside learning rather than doing stuff inside. But yes, it was adapting either the tool or where we were. Oh, I think you're muted, Fiona.
There's always one, and on this call it's me. There's a really powerful point in what you're saying then about the environment meeting the needs of the student rather than the student being expected to fit into the mold of the environment. And it's a powerful thread there, isn't it? Helen, thank you so much. And Tracy, can I bounce over to you for a moment? Because that note from what Helen was just saying there's something about giving that learner a sense of dignity in terms of the provision that's in place. I know that's something that's been very important to you. I wonder if you could just sort of share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, with the support that we've put in place just generally across a sea of 30 faces, or even 31 or 32 in a classroom, with traditional teaching, those supports came in the forms of additional worksheets or worksheets that looked different from each other, or things that manipulatives that were on the table. But what we have now, even with our highest needs children, is we have engagement with digital technology, and those resources that we have to support those children are in a sense hidden. And they're available for all children in the classroom. So that dignity that child or that group of children feel in an instance where actually the audio recording is directed at particular children is available for all children. And so while we really want those 3 children to audio record their response, we may get 8 children in the class because that's just a choice that they make. And so that dignity in those children that don't feel different from the rest of the children. I know I'm talking a lot about inclusion, but I think that sort of is one of the pillars that equity stands on, isn't it? So those children that you're talking about are their needs are almost hidden within the classroom because of the use of some of the tools that we have.
And that sense for young people about not wanting to be seen to be different or not wanting to be seen to need additional support is particularly or increasingly becomes more of a challenge when we move into the secondary landscape. I know there's a number of colleagues on the call who work in secondary contexts. I'm not going to request anyone by name and be that mean, but I'd be really grateful if you might share perhaps your perspectives. I mean, what do you see in your classrooms in terms of students feeling self-conscious about asking to do something in a particular way or having the opportunity to do something in a particular way? And how are you using, or how do you envisage using digital or contemporary tools to help with that? I wonder if someone might like to speak to that point.
I mean, Fiona, I can even bring my own children into this. I have a daughter who she's at secondary school, and she closed her fingers in the car door and broke 3 of them. And she had an option to use a laptop in her lessons. And even though she had 3 broken fingers on her writing hand, she chose not to do that because of the attention that it may draw to her within a secondary school classroom.
And that's quite a common common
Absolutely.
challenge, that students who could benefit from the use of different contemporary tools sometimes choose not to because they think those tools are different. And so that sense of equity, these things are for everybody to use, whether they're necessary or whether they're useful, is a powerful message. And actually, when we look at the statistics about how many students use different kinds of accessibility features, we find typically that if you looked at how many students would be, let's call it, prescribed the use of an accessibility function versus how many would choose or do choose to use them if it's equitable provision of all, you find it's somewhere between double and triple the levels of usage. So statistically, it's quite a powerful thing. I'm imagining that lots of people have got lots of things going on in the background, because there are a number of colleagues on the call who I know could speak powerfully to these points. But for whatever reason, I'm not going to push the point on that one. So let's.
Sorry, Fiona, it does say in the chat, somebody said,
there we go.
The responses on the wall have been refreshed.
Christian, you hero, thank you. I was hoping that nudge might come through. Let's give colleagues a chance to read through to those. And if, as you see things, you want to comment on them or respond to them or hop on and speak further to them, please do. There's a really interesting thread there that draws out both physical barriers, conceptual barriers, emotional barriers, psychological barriers, and behavior barriers. And all of these with that notion of dignity first approach to equity that Tracy's so capably spoken about.
I also want to draw out what Christian said, that independence and being able to work independently has been such a massive shift in our classroom. We all know the constraints of budgets and not having an additional adults in the classroom to move around. So 9 times out of 10, you are a man alone in a classroom with all of these children, and you have lots of children who want or need you. But if you have planned in advance those tools that ensure that there's equity for all children, with different starting points, they may not need you, and they may be more independent, and you may have time to, to move around to other children that need you.
It's an important point, that sense of creating dignity, which creates equity, which creates capacity for intervention and learning. Christian, I can see you have your hand up, and I'd love for you to build on some of this, because I know you're doing a huge amount across the Children Learning Trust.
Yeah, so I was talked to that point that I kind of pasted on, and we're having a look at as well as ensuring that all lesson materials are uploaded onto Google Classroom to make sure that students who are perhaps for various reasons missing lessons are able to perhaps keep up a little bit, but also utilizing some of those kind of AI, starting to utilize some of those AI tools that create things like audio overviews of content and things like that for people like young carers who struggle with having the time to do as much revision as perhaps some of their peers. So looking for other opportunities, if they can put something on their phone and listen with their headphones whilst doing something else, or even whilst traveling on their bus home and things like that. We're starting to look at all those opportunities for revision, particularly with those students in mind. So we've had some initial kind of good feedback around that, and one school in particular is really focusing on that at the moment, looking at just all those different opportunities to engage with the materials. Some enabled by AI, some not. Sometimes the material generated by AI, but yeah, giving options for students to engage with things in a range of different ways that suits their kind of the challenges that they have, or the kind of lifestyles that they have outside of school, trying to kind of level things up or provide equity in that way.
It's interesting, Christian, that you mentioned the role of AI there. There was a teacher I was working with yesterday, very recent anyway, that was talking about the conversion of materials from text-based materials to podcast style to infographics, and then students using those in different ways for revision purposes. And also, you alluded to it just a moment ago, using them while they're maybe on the bus on the way to school, or in different places and different contexts. It takes us beyond the classroom. You've been doing loads in this AI space, Christian. Can you kind of just share with us a few more insights into that, and where you're seeing that direction of travel start to go?
Sure, yeah. So we're working on some new content as well so we worked on the DFE materials, and we're actually looking specifically at inclusion at the moment as part of the kind of new materials. So excuse me. We are just looking at kind of opening up very cautiously, very carefully, kind of the options for chatbots to some students as well. Of course, it needs to be tools that are very safe and have an overview, and you can kind of see and have alerts built in and things like that. But we've been having a range of different tools where it can do that questioning, and also at the same time trying to build those healthy habits. Again, quite often it's sometimes the more vulnerable students who will turn to AI to do the work for them, and just building those healthy habits around understanding that AI can actually, getting AI to ask you questions is a much better way to get it to support you than getting it to do the work for you as well. So trying to build up that all that kind of digital metacognition in a way, that understanding of where technology supports best in that journey, but that's all tied in with within the trust. That's tied in with kind of lots of different look at from different angles at AI. So a curriculum in PSHE around safety, AI safety and things like that, and AI literacy, and learning and computing about how AI works. So we're coming at it from lots of different angles, but starting to try and make use of that for that what you might call personalized learning, but those opportunities to kind of to practice a little bit more. And we have worked with someone I think you might know, Jane Waite, as well, from Raspberry Pi Foundation. And it's interesting because we were talking about this conversational AI and releasing that to students as well, but also considering the social aspects of learning as well. And one of the suggestions she made that we're trying out with it is actually, when using it in class, pairing students to have that conversation, so they're still having that human conversation still as well. So that's a little bit of what kind of some of the things that we've been using, but generally just in terms of teacher use, the ability to rapidly adapt materials, and also looking at how TAs can use it if they don't have the subject knowledge about something where they're supporting a student, how they can perhaps get AI to come up with some questions or some kind of tutoring type questions and work through that with the student that they're supporting, to get around that perhaps that knowledge gap that they have a little bit as well. And of course, teachers being able to adapt materials very quickly and change reading levels and things like that are some of the other uses that we found. So yeah, that's a bit about what we've been looking at the trust, and that inclusion and send area is something we're doing a sector survey on at the moment as well, to try and find out a bit more about what people want from the next set of materials in terms of supporting with that.
Thank you so much, Christian. And I just want to lean into two things that you said there. One is that I know that you're just wonderful at sharing this sort of pathfinding work you're doing in this space. So I wonder in a sec if you would mind just giving people a link in the chat box or showing how people could find out more about that if they're interested to do so, because it really is fascinating, the work that you're leading in that space. The other one, you've just reminded me of something that you and I were looking at a couple of weeks ago with that, and you mentioned it about the conversational piece where students are able to ask their AI to ask them questions to help them understand their own understanding about a particular topic or concept. And there's something really interesting there from an equity as a mindset perspective about when children or young people go home and talk about what they're learning in school. And that works brilliantly if there are people at home that want to engage with that conversation. But of course, not every young person goes home to an environment that wants to talk about learning. So there is scope maybe there for those conversations to continue outside of the classroom with some of these tools, should the student be inclined to do so. Would you mind showing just very briefly a little bit about that? Because it's quite a fascinating space, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a specific tool that we're using at the moment that was developed by Eton, but has been shared widely. So it's open source, and we've installed that on the server, and we're just starting with some trials of that. So that is more aimed towards secondary, GCSE, and A level. And you can upload the exam specification to it for your exam board, and it will generate essentially a prompt that you could share with students, and that prompt will let you then interact. It will do various things. It's all based around a range of different kind of Steve, who developed it, looks at the kind of neuroscience behind questioning and things like that, and it's designed. There's about 40 different question types, but it will select the best for the topic you choose. So you could be saying, I'm GCSE biology, I'm looking at plant cells, and it will suggest some activities that will be useful for that. And you can use it in a variety of different ways. So some teachers are using it on the board, and they're having that conversation but discussing with the class at the same time. I've spoken to some tutors who are using it, so they're sharing that screen and they're getting the questions are coming up from the AI, but then they're having that conversation with a young person or group of young people to work through what the answer is, so it's generating those questions and then giving feedback. But equally, as a kind of revision tool outside of school, those questions could be shared for students to practice recalling their knowledge. And it works really, really well. It's because you've uploaded the exam spec. The prompt is something much more complex than your average student, or indeed average adult could generate, and it generates these prompts that you can then use to have a conversation with AI to kind of deepen your understanding of a topic and practice recall. So that's essentially the tool, but being used in a range of different ways. And that's Kately-bot, which is open source and can be installed on a server and be used. We've got that running across the trust as well. And the other tool is the Brisk Student Boost activities, which takes content from your presentation and generates an activity which you can share with your students. You can monitor it, and they can be having a conversation with a character. So let's say you're talking about GCSE post-war history and you're looking at Rosa Parks. You can have a presentation, and then you could generate a conversation for your students to have with Rosa Parks, which will test their kind of deeper understanding of that. And so it's kind of, you're getting that information all the time about how they're answering, because you can see their conversation, but it's assessing beyond that kind of multiple choice questioning. It's they have to write think more deeply, I think, about it. So those are a couple of tools that we're using.
Thank you so much, and particularly because I kind of put you on the spot there slightly, Christian, for sharing that. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you. It's really fascinating, that work that connects the role of AI as a contemporary learning tool with the space about human connectedness and discussion, about broadening the relationship between what happens inside classrooms and outside of classrooms, about nurturing the importance of conversation between students, between home and school, and all of these different elements that so often people hear the use of digital tools and think a sort of sense of fragmentation of oracy in relationships and people and questioning and discussion. But actually, the digital tools can, if used from that kind of pedagogy first mindset that Tracy and Helen and Christian have both spoken to, draw those things together and actually turbocharge what we're able to offer young people. So much in this space. Christian, if you haven't already, perhaps you could just drop a link into the chat for colleagues just who might be interested in finding out a little bit more about some of the things you shared there. And Tracy, perhaps if I could ask you to pop a link in to your school, so if people want to come and explore more about the school, that they can do so. But I'm very mindful of time, so we must move on. We've talked a little bit in this session about some of the kind of questions that we've been exploring. And I'd now just like to take you forward to the timeline for the rest of the Contemporary Adaptive Teaching paper. So as I mentioned, we've had lots of conversations in virtual roundtables, loads of conversations sort of periphery to that in terms of twilights and insets and staff meetings and discussions and workshops and all sorts to try and surface the many different considerations that have emerged, that have burst out of the provocations in that original discussion paper. So what we're now doing is spending the next month or so just collating that back together, and then the final version of the paper will be published later on in November. If you would like to create any or share any further contributions or feedback, please do. We'd really welcome that. If you'd like to do that offline, as lots of people prefer to, absolutely fine. Still very much want to hear those contributions. And then just to conclude our session today, we just want to say a huge and enormous thank you to Sarah, to Terry, to the Nearpod and the Renaissance team for generously supporting the work that we're doing in developing this sector-wide definition of contemporary adaptive teaching. A massive thank you to Tracy Murray, our guest speaker this afternoon, and to Christian, Helen and colleagues for joining us and sharing your contributions via chat, via microphone on the discussion boards, and as I can already see, via email coming through as back channel as well. So huge thank you to you, and we'd love to hear your views once that final discussion paper lands as well. So I'm just going to pass back to Sarah to close us off.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And yes, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. It's been an absolutely brilliant series. If you didn't manage to catch any of the earlier sessions in the series, they are all hosted on our webpage where you signed up for this event. So you'll be able to find those. And we can send that. We will send the recordings out again to everybody that's registered. But yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. Really excited and really looking forward to seeing the final paper with all the contributions that everybody's made. So please do get involved and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. That's the end of today's session. So we will be closing in a moment's time. Thank you very much for joining us, particularly joining us live. We appreciate that. If you want to close the session down, you can press end or leave at the bottom, or the X on the top hand corner. So I've just made a note on there. There's a message in the chat for you, Sarah, just so you're aware. But I'm going to thank you very much. Thank you to our guests. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Sarah. And hope you all have a lovely evening. Goodbye.